All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my look at Tennessee, Oklahoma college game days in town for a perennial top 15 matchup in the SEC. Live from Norman, Oklahoma, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The total is set at 58.5. The Vols are 7.5-point favorites. Looking at this Tennessee offense, they've been red hot this season, scoring 50-plus points in 3 straight games. They had 50-plus, I'm pretty sure, at half against Kent State. This is a team that had 740 yards against a very, very poor opponent. But, they've been very good in the other games, too. NC State, they had 51, 250 rushing. They had the ideal balance as well, with 211 passing. This offense has just been incredibly explosive, putting up a bunch of production so far this year, regardless of the opponent. Pretty good defense in NC State. Pretty good program there as well. So very impressive victory they got in Charlotte a couple weeks ago. Now they head into Norman. Nico Lamaliva, this is a guy that I was going to pick to win the Heisman this year. Ended up picking him just to be a finalist. I think he'll be in that top 5, top 10 bracket by the end of the year. About 700 yards passing, 6 touchdowns. Did have 2 picks in the NC State game. Hasn't exactly been a barrage of passing. They've been really running the ball. He only had 19 dropbacks against Kent State. Solid performance there. The biggest thing for him, though, is how can he handle his first road test? This is a good defensive staff. Obviously, Brett Venables at the helm. He's going to face some real puzzles, and I think his elite playmaking can certainly offset that. This is a guy who can do a lot with his arm talent. Certainly has great mobility. A guy who's incredibly tall, very lengthy. What is he, 6'6"? This is a guy who has tremendous capabilities that can certainly offset that. But in terms of, sitting back in the pocket and, trying to diagnose what Oklahoma's going to do, he's not going to be able to do that for 4 quarters. He's not going to be able to do that for, most part of this game. He's certainly going to have to rely on his playmaking at times because he still is a young quarterback. I think as time goes on, he'll certainly, pick up plenty in that regard. But that's going to be the biggest thing with Nico, because again, did have 2 picks against a good NC State defense. So it's been less than perfect for him this year, and I think this is a game you could certainly look for him to be not as strong in. And now you look at the rushing attack. Only 2 teams in FBS have over 900 rushing through 3 games. UCF and Tennessee both have over 1,000. So, these guys have been putting up yards in bunches. The volunteer rushing attack, Dylan Sampson, he's a guy that I was a big fan of coming into last year. And, of course, there's a bit of a 3-headed monster. So, it was a clammed-up backfield. This year, he's going to get a bulk of the touches, and he's impressed on 45 attempts, 357, 9 touchdowns, having a phenomenal season. He's as talented as it gets. Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, 2 freshmen right behind him. And, with a combined 3 touchdowns between those 2, well over 300 yards as well, putting up 336 as a team. And obviously Tennessee is a team that loves to run the ball. They like to move fast, and it starts with their rushing ability. Picking up yards in bunches is really what they do, and 7 yards per attempt so far this season. Obviously that number will come down, but last year their leading rusher Jalen Wright averaged almost 7.5 yards per attempt. So even throughout the duration of the season, this is still a highly explosive rushing attack. They're going to be facing a very good Oklahoma run defense, at least up until this point. A D-line that is certainly going to be one of the tougher ones they see this year. And, the offensive line for Tennessee, I think it's one of the better units in this conference. Obviously, one that's very underrated, not talked about. Of course, it starts with a tremendous center in Cooper Mays. He's great. Right guard, Javonte Spraggins. I'm a big fan of Javonte's, that is. Big fan of his. I thought he was the best lineman coming into the year. There's some question marks, though, maybe on this left side. Andraj Karik, this is a guy that's having a good season so far, but in his career has really been less than stellar, not much of a difference maker. And, the left tackle, Lance Hurd, obviously a high-prized transfer they added. He's still an incredibly young player, though, and I think that's where things could certainly get a little hairy for them, is even though Mays is phenomenal at center, right guard is pretty polished, not really worried about the right tackle spot. I think this interior offensive line can have some issues if Karik is struggling there. Lance Hurd, a younger guy who might have some struggles because he's going to be facing an extensive pass rush. We'll talk about the defense for Oklahoma later, but the guys he'll be facing, he's not going to have much of a, rep off. He's not going to be able to take much time to try and gather himself, as he's going to be facing some legit heat. And I think that it can become a rough night if those factors start to occur. I think they'll be fine, but I think they'll have occasional struggles, and you can't let that put you behind the sticks too much. Can't let that, affect Nico, maybe with potential turnovers. So the offensive line, they have to be above average in terms of consistency. I think they'll do that, but will they, get stalled out maybe? That's something you certainly want to watch for. Again, though, Heupel loves this rushing attack. The offense moves with tempo, opens up the passing game, which has an abundance of wide receivers. Dante Thornton, a $169 and 2 scores so far. Obviously, a lot of that came in week 1. Kind of cooled off in week 2 with no touches, but this past week had a couple of big plays. Chris Brazzell, another transfer, then leads the team in receptions with 10. Brew McCoy, a veteran, has really resurrected his career here in Knoxville. And then Squirrel White, him and McCoy both have exactly 108 yards. Sampson has been, a reliable player in the backfield as well. Miles Kitzelman, a nice tight end who has 2 touchdowns. So this is an incredibly deep receiving core. Tennessee, I think they're stacked at this position. I heard people say Colorado probably is the best foursome in college football, and I think Tennessee probably is going to get the nod in that one potentially. That's just how deep they are at this position. So a very good offense for Tennessee. I don't expect them to put up 50 points in this game. I certainly didn't expect them to put 50 on NC State either. I think I picked them to score 38 in that contest. So obviously a couple more scores than anticipated. Averaging almost 64 points per game, though. This is a Tennessee offense that can hurt you in a variety of different ways. So this is going to be a very interesting attack, especially as they go on the road to a pretty tough environment in Norman. And again, the things you want to look for is Nico, against a defense that's going to look to, disguise a lot of stuff. That's a 4-2-5 unit they run, and of course the left side of the offensive line. Wonder if that can become questionable at some point. Now you look at the Oklahoma offense, a unit that has been on kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. They were putting up about 34 points per game. It's been very sloppy this year, though. Jackson Arnold, he's also, a guy who is entering his second year of his respective program as a 5-star recruit out of high school. 484 yards this year, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks in each of the last 2 games. $161 per game, though. This passing attack has just been less than stellar. He had a very bad pick 6 against Tulane, has not been very good under pressure one bit. Seen some bad reads or late throws from him in the bowl game. Remember, we did the diagnosis on that many months ago, and you're still working out the kinks as a young quarterback, and those are the things we saw in his first career start, and obviously he's going to continue to get better. So far it's not been great, but as a collective bunch they haven't been very impressive. They've been really hampered at wide receiver early on this year. Andre Anthony not playing much. I anticipate he'll play in this game. I'm not sure. Jaleel Farouk, of course, he went down after one big play. You're going to probably see a heavy dose of screens, QB counters, powers. He's been a good runner for them this year. He's actually the team's leading rusher. But in terms of explosive plays from this passing attack, seems like they're going to be hard to find. Of course, Nick Anderson hasn't seen the field yet. Seems pretty hopeful for this contest. He's a big-time playmaker for them. He was a guy that had over 20. He had 21 yards per catch last year and 10 scores. If you can get him involved, mixed with Deion Burks and his versatility, he's been phenomenal for them. 22 grabs, $169, and 3 touchdowns. The rest of the way for this receiving group's not been great. Bauer Sharp at tight end, he's got 10 grabs, and then Brennan Thompson has 6 receptions as well. He's a speedster. They want to probably get involved. So I think if Anderson plays, you're going to be looking at a much better opportunity for big plays to strike. But Burks can't just keep carrying the load each week. He's doing it pretty admirably so far. This is a guy they like to get the ball to in a variety of different ways. And I think you're certainly going to have to lean on that explosiveness in this one. But if Anderson comes back, that's certainly going to help up with this passing attack, I would say. Now you look at, the run game and an offensive line that, they lost a lot coming into this season, knew they would be battle-tested, mainly in the run game. So, figured we'd see a heavy dose of the passing attack unless Seth Luttrell's offense. They've just not been able to do that due to the other negatives we just discussed in the offensive line. It's really only gotten worse. Branson Hickman getting hurt, only a few snaps into the years really, hurt them. Grillian Hatchett was going to be the backup center. He's out for the year. So, they're really, reeling here on the offensive line. You're looking at, Joshua Bates being the starting center now. He's a guy that didn't play very good against Tulane this past Saturday. Logan Howland, he's been all right at left tackle. Jacob Sexton, a veteran at left guard, has also kind of been less than stellar. This is a group that has not been all that great outside of Michael Tarquin. He's probably been the most polished for them at right tackle. A guy that's also played, a tremendous amount of football. But it's really hurt, not just the abilities to throw the ball downfield, but the rushing attack as well. Javante Barnes has stepped up the past 2 weeks to, 126 yards total now. Taylor Tatum, a true freshman, has gotten involved. He's got 2 touchdowns. Gavin Sawchuk has been nowhere to be found. 16 attempts for 35 yards. This is a guy with tremendous speed, a player that was supposed to be a really explosive player for them this year. Last year they really struggled to generate big rushing plays until the second half of the season, where he really took over and elevated those numbers. And right now they just can't do much at all. 159 yards per game rushing. It's just not been pretty. 182 against Tulane. They got back on track a little bit more. Only 75 the week prior against Houston, though, and now you're playing an elite defensive line. This is also a team that bounced back on third down, 8 of 16. That's pretty good, but for the year, they're still 30% on third down. The 2 games beforehand, they were just abysmal, only 5 conversions through the first 2 weeks against some pretty poor teams. So this has not been, a great start to the year for Venable's offense, and obviously the injuries on the O-line mixed in with a bunch of transfers. The injuries at wide receiver hasn't been great. A less than experienced quarterback at starting. It's not been a perfect storm one bit for Oklahoma, and again, you're going to have to see a heavy dose of those screens to try and loosen up the D-line, QB counters and whatnot. You're probably going to see 15 attempts from Arnold. He's got to be able to protect the ball. I think he will. He's been a good runner for them this year. But this is going to be tough for them because, again, this is an elite defensive line. Now moving to that Tennessee defense. And this D-line, I thought, entered elite status with what they were able to do against NC State. 13 tackles for loss in that contest. They're incredibly ferocious. They had 3 sacks as well. Didn't really do much against Kent State. Didn't really have to, though. They kind of took the night off. Why would you not when your offense is putting up, points in droves? They're going to get back on track here, though, in terms of production. I would assume, just alluded to the matchup they have. And we'll kind of look at some of the superstars here. Omar Thomas, Omar Norman Lott on the interior. These guys have been splendid this year. Obviously, you have one of the nation's best players in all of college football, and James Pierce coming off one side. And then I think the most surprising is, Tyree West. He's a guy that's really emerged. 2 TFLs in the season opener, a guy who's been providing them some very sturdy play. Dominic Bailey, another guy that also has been pretty reliable for them. Joshua Josephs, a younger edge player that's been really good against the run. Who's mainly going to play? Probably the veterans that I talked about at first, but I'm just, listing a bunch of names because these guys are incredibly deep on the D-line. I don't think this is any joke of a unit. They've been very good against the run for a couple of years now, but they're just now, I think, entering elite territory. I think this is a game where they can really feast and really prove that that's an accurate acclimation. Tennessee has been tremendous against the run this year. Only 167 yards allowed, 1.7 yards per attempt. Again, you face 2 pretty woeful opponents, then a good one in NC State that has, pretty solid O-line, pretty respectable rushing attack, held them absolutely in check, dominated them all game long. So this is a team that they're stacked on the interior. They have guys who can win on the perimeter in terms of edge rushing. This is a nasty unit for Tennessee. It's not all about offense here for Josh Heupel. This defense is tremendous. And, of course, you look at a linebacking group, a younger part of this defense. You certainly wonder how they would fare. And so far this year, they've done a good job. Arian Carter, Jeremiah Tellander. These guys have been good. They've been getting the most snaps. Keenan Philly as well. So you got 3 linebackers right here. They've been really duking it out for snaps. I think the biggest issue with them was how good will they be in coverage. I thought they did a pretty solid job in the NC State game. But now you're going against the team in Oklahoma that they do have some speed. They have talented players. If you're going to send blitzes and whatnot, which I think is probably likely because this is an offensive line that has been pretty poor. The quarterback has not been good under pressure. So you're going to look to try and blitz him, even though they don't have to. I think it's probably going to be in their best interest to just make it hectic around the line of scrimmage. And that's going to lead to, hot routes. Guys like Nick Anderson, if he ends up playing. Brennan Thompson has a lot of speed. Guys on drags, quick routes. Stuff across the middle that could certainly affect these linebackers. They have to be able to, tackle in space and be effective. And I think they'll have a pretty solid game. I think this is a growing part of this Tennessee defense to only get better as the season goes on. But those are the things you want to watch for with them. I think you look at the secondary. This is a young group. And in the preseason, I picked Oklahoma to win this game. And I thought that the receiving group, I thought would be full healthy, of course, would probably have, a bit of a good performance against this younger secondary. That doesn't really seem to be the case anymore with all the injuries and just the toughness that has really been for this OU offense to really produce. Jermod McCoy, Jordan Matthews, 2 corners that have been very good for them so far. Jalen McMurray as well. These guys have just not been tested one bit. Obviously Casey Conception from NC State is a really good player. They have a capable quarterback, solid supporting cast. Nothing what Oklahoma will probably attack with. But so far they've passed their tests. This has been a good secondary for them. Not too worried about what might happen now because the explosiveness seems to be a little bit less. But you look at another guy, 2 of the safeties, Will Brooks, Andre Turrenton, a veteran, and John Slaughter, of course. Starting to figure out who will be the starters because they've just been rotating so much this year. True freshman Boo Carter has been, less than ideal in the slot. Him and Christian Harrison, it's kind of a position they're trying to figure out there. Their group is depleted, though, pretty much in flux. Don't really see them struggling unless OU can really run the ball. If Henderson and Anthony do end up playing, then being able to defend downfield is certainly going to be tested. They're going to look to get them on corner routes, post routes, in the middle of the field. They've only allowed 2 passes of 20-plus yards all year, 5th in FBS. So this is Tennessee secondary that's been playing very good so far, but I think those are 2 keys that OU might look to do. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball that much in this contest, but if they do and they start moving fast, play action downfield, I think it's certainly going to be something they can take advantage of when it comes to this volunteer defense. Now moving to the Oklahoma defense, obviously Brent Venables has been around a couple of years now, and you really expect them to take massive leaps forward on this side of the ball, giving up 11 points per game. They've been very good against the run, have not faced tough opponents, even though Tulane, I thought, this is an offense that was pretty good the week earlier against Kansas State. Pretty respectable group at the end of the day, held them to 106 rushing. 2.2 yards per attempt are what opponents are coming away with so far this season. R. Mason Thomas coming off a very stellar effort where he absolutely demolished Tulane with 3 sacks in that one. Ethan Downs is a guy who has been a veteran for a couple years now, is highly productive. I mean, this is a high-energy pass rusher that they have. Again, you talk about Lance Hurd at left tackle. Guy who's a pretty good player, but again, he's not going to be able to take many plays off, because he's a guy who's very inexperienced so far. Going up against these 2 edge rushers could be an opportunity for them to produce. And the rest of the defensive line's also kind of, played up to the par with these guys as well. Dominic Williams, the big transfer from TCU, he's a physical nightmare. Grayson Halton has been really good. Jaden Jackson's a big body. They have a veteran in, Trace Ford, another one in Dejon Terry. I mean, this is an incredibly deep defensive line as well. I don't think they're as good as Tennessee's because they don't have that elite player like James Pierce. But this is quietly a very good unit. A lot of people probably won't give enough credit to. I think they have a lot of depth as well. They also have a 5-star in David Stone who could come in and make an impact. So this is a deep defensive line. They've been playing very good so far this year, and I think that left side might be an opportunity for them to strike. And of course, at the same time, the linebacking group has been rallying around Danny Stutzman, a guy who is, a high-end producer, has 33 tackles through 3 games. This is a guy who also, plays with great discipline. Another guy who has high energy. I mean, phenomenal leader for this side of the ball. And the other guys have been playing good around him. Kip Lewis, Sammy Osaigwo, Robert Spears-Jennings is playing in the box a good bit. They're starting to play better. Kobe McKenzie as well. He's made some big plays. I'm more, happy with this linebacking core than I was coming into the year. I thought this would be an area where they might struggle for a little bit longer. So far, they've been holding up their own end of the bargain. Stutzman can't do it all by himself, even though some of his numbers would suggest he could. He's a player they're going to look to move around a good bit and certainly look to get into the backfield because he makes a lot of negative plays. Stutzman is elite. We'll talk about the secondary here for OU as well. They faced a Tulane offense that has a good bunch of receivers. I think they're pretty deep they're pretty good as it gets, I'd say, in the group of 5, 4 weapons. A young quarterback in Mensa that has shown some good ability to throw it downfield. Again, he was good against Kansas State, stifled him a great deal, held him to 45% completion rating, forced him into some real tough throws. They did have, an interception on him, but there was a lot of knockaways, a lot of toughly contested catches that the receivers were forced to make. And I anticipate Venables will scheme up some ways to confuse a young Nico, and I think they'll have an opportunity to create in this game as well. These cornerbacks, they'll certainly wonder how they will hold up. Connie Walker, Dejan Malone, they've been all right, I guess you could say, so far this year. It's more about, I think, what you can do in safety with the safety group in terms of Billy Bowman. Spears-Jennings also plays a lot in that role. Being a safety, even though he does play a good bit in the box, and he likes to make plays in that regard. Peyton Bowen as well, a 5-star in last year's class that made some big plays. So I think the safety group is, pretty good. You also have Woody Washington, a guy who likes to, occasionally get on the field. I guess now in his career has, not been playing as much, but he's a guy that can get on the field and make plays. He's their full-time slot now. Kendall Dolby's been playing good. These are guys that have good ball hawking ability. Last year, Oklahoma as a team had 20 interceptions. Of course, Billy Bowman led the way in that regard. This is a secondary that's in much better, in a much better state than it was last 2 years ago. That is when they were struggling in terms of giving up big plays. Struggled to produce interceptions as well. Much better positioning. They'll need to be good in run support as well, but I certainly think they're going to cover a lot of distance in this backfield. So when Tennessee's looking to attack downfield, I think these guys will be a good job, covering half of the field and forcing them into some mistakes. We'll get a tail of the tape, the team comparisons. I think Tennessee gets a lot of edges quarterback, running back, wide receiver. I think their skilled group is just much better at this point in time. I think maybe you could have had an argument at wide receiver if Oklahoma was healthier. They're not, so pretty easy edge for the Vols. Offensive line, I think they're a much better group as well compared to where the Sooners are at right now. The D line, I just raved about the one for Oklahoma, but Tennessee's not a bad unit one bit. I think it's an elite unit. It's phenomenal. You could even maybe call that even. I think the D lines are certainly going to steal the show in this one. I'll go ahead and be generous and give the linebacking group to OU, even though the Vols are growing in that area. And then in the secondary, I just think they have more playmakers. They have more veterans. Just an opportunity for them to attack in that secondary. I'll give them the nod in that regard. One of the final thoughts and the prediction. Keys to the game. For Tennessee, this defensive line needs to cook a weaker O-line. Nico needs to play clean. Mistake-free football from him, and the run game needs to find its groove. It doesn't matter if it's Arnold with 15 carries or the running backs combining for 30. They need to find a groove. They got to be better. Got to keep Tennessee's O on the other side line, and time possession really needs to be dominated, I'd say, by the Sooners. Secondary needs to force a few turnovers. I keep talking about the opportunities they might be able to create with scheming and just overall playmaking from these guys that have shown the ability to do so in the past. I think this will be a closer game than people think. 27-21, Tennessee over OU. I really want to pick OU to maybe win this game. I just don't think that their offensive line is going to be able to, win their matchup. Don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think it's D is going to step up and play a really good game. I just don't think they'll be able to sustain enough plays on their own side of the ball. Need to be aggressive downfield, though. I think Arnold will need to protect the ball, especially if he's going to get those 15-plus rushing attempts and whatnot. So I think Oklahoma can hang around in this game. I think it's possible they even win it. I just, again, don't think they're going to be able to step up enough on the offensive side of the ball. But this will be a close one. Tennessee to win by 6. A team of the Volunteers that's really emerging as a playoff favorite. So, that's it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.